My name is Dr. Irving Benoit-Wolter.
I'm Stefan Kaps.
My name is Sofia Bjerre-Lopes.
My name is Isis Mentif-Wheelwright.
My name is Carla Figueiredo.
My name is José Luis Banea.
Hi, I am Wilfred van Dellen.
My name is Isabel Campil.
The Eurovisions team
invite you to the 4th edition of the EUROVISIONS International Conference.
I look forward to share my work with you at Eurovisions.
Share the moment with us during the upcoming edition of Eurovisions. Good afternoon. Good to see you all joining either on Facebook or YouTube or any other channel that we're reaching you from. It's good to see you again on the second day of the Eurovisions Conference. And yesterday we already started with a very nice day filled with discussions and presentations. For example, we had Michael Skay. Thank you very much for your keynote address yesterday, which talked about fans and anti-fans and non-fans, concepts that we were introduced to yesterday. But also, let's say, the EBU versus the local broadcasters and how the tensions between those two actually work out when we look at global appeal versus staying relevant for the European continent, basically. So thank you very much, Michael Skay, for that. Also a thank you to Isabella Swanholm, José Banea, Isis Wheelwright, and Stefan Kaps for presenting their science slam. They talked to us about papers that they wrote, and we had some interesting discussions there. And we even had a winner who won this wonderful German book, right, Irvin, about the Eurovision Song Contest, learning a new language there. We had a very interesting interlude, once again last year as well, by Korjun. We got quite some interesting responses there about his mashup and mixes of all the songs that participated in the 2021 Eurovision Song Contest. And a big thank you also to Dean Valitic, who joined us as a host, but also wrote a very interesting book about the history of Europe and the Eurovision Song Contest. If you want to watch that again, go ahead. It's on our YouTube channel, and you can rewatch it or watch it for the first time, delayed if you didn't join us yesterday. Let's continue with the second day, and we have some interesting stuff coming up. First of all, later on, in a bit, we'll have a panel discussion talking about the future of Eurovision, but also looking at the history of it and how it changed over time, changed in terms of necessary changes, but also forced changes. And of course, we've seen the biggest forced change ever for Eurovision happening actually this year when we had to deal with the pandemic. So we'll talk about that with a very interesting panel later on. But first, we'd like to start with a presentation, keynote address by two people that I'm very glad of to have as part of our conference day today. That's Karel van Dijk and John Ashley Burgoyne, right? Welcome. You're all in the Netherlands, right? Utrecht. And John, where are you at the moment?
Amsterdam.
Amsterdam, there we go. So Amsterdam is joining, Utrecht is joining, and I'm in Maastricht. So the Netherlands is represented quite well from all kinds of directions. We're going to talk about artificial intelligence in the Eurovision Song Contest, but also by starting to talk about your song contest in a bit, which is about artificial intelligence creating songs for that song contest and actually having a winner. Later on, we'll also have the winner of last year as part of our musical interlude, but we'll deal with that in a bit. In the meantime, for those of you watching, keep in mind that you can interact with us by putting questions in the chat, so the YouTube chat, but also on Facebook. And we'll keep an eye on that and involve that in the discussion, which will take place after the keynote address. And to tease your mind just a little bit, I want you to think about the Eurovision Song Contest 100 years from now, maybe 50 years, maybe 10 years. And the question to the audience is, keep this in the back of your mind, would you accept the next winner of the Eurovision Song Contest, or in 10 years, to be an artificial intelligent composer? Or even further into the future, would you accept an artificial intelligence singer winning the Eurovision Song Contest? That's something that we're going to debate about later on. But first, Karen, John, very welcome. I'd like to ask you to introduce yourselves and then go right ahead with your keynote address.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes. So hello, everyone. My name is Karen van Dijk. I'm a editor at Dutch public broadcaster VPRO. And with me is John Ashley Burgoyne. He is one of the team one of the members of a team that actually participated in the very first AI song contest in 2020. And he's a musicologist at the University of Amsterdam. And I'm actually looking now for my notes because they disappeared. Where are they? Yes, I have them here. Great. Okay, so very nice to meet you. I'm going to tell you about the very first AI song contest, which we organized last year in Europe and Australia. So in 2020, teams from all over Europe and Australia competed to create the next Eurovision hit using artificial intelligence. This contest was organized by Dutch public broadcaster VPRO together with NPO Innovation, radio station 3FM, and with the help of the EBU, which was really great. They were actually our voting supervisors. They have the experience with it. So glad they could help us with this competition. And what was the competition about? Well, what we wanted to figure out is, could AI help to create the ultimate Eurovision hit song? So it's really a competition that's about human AI co-creation and to research this topic. We are very much inspired by Eurovision on several levels, actually. We had 13 teams from all over Europe and Australia with coders, scientists, musicians, artists, and really everything in between that worked on their songs. We had jury votes and we had audience votes. So just like the real Eurovision Song Contest. And actually the votes went up to 12 points. So that was also inspired by Eurovision. And what was very interesting, just like Eurovision, is that the audience votes and the jury votes were actually quite different from each other. So the jury was really evaluating the AI process, the human AI co-creation process, and the audience was listening to the songs and thinking, okay, do I like this song? Yes or no. Another level that they evaluated the songs on, the audience, was Eurovisionness. So is this song, could it compete in a Eurovision Song Contest or not? But also we used Eurovision data for this competition. Actually, all the teams received from us a data set with 200 Eurovision songs, not only winners, there were also songs that did actually terrible, but songs that from the last 60 years, winners and losers. And we shared with them a metadata sheet where they could find things like genre, tempo, is it an upbeat or a ballad, the time signature, key, is it a minor or a major song, like really the information that you would need to put into a computer to evaluate these songs. Also what they received from us was a document with all the lyrics of these 200 songs and the MIDI files. So that's actually the files that a computer can read, the musical data with choruses, verses, and bridges. They could use to train their AIs. I have to say with this that 200 songs is too little to train AI on. So they were free to use other data if they wanted. That was really up to the teams themselves. They just had to write about it. So they had to tell the jury how they used the data, what other data did they add, how they picked or cherry picked the things that the computer created. So 13 teams went to work and created a song. This is a spoiler alert. I mean, it was already last year, 2020, but it was the very first time that Australia won the Eurovision Song Contest. Okay, it was not Eurovision, of course, but yes, Australia won this competition. A German team was second actually, but the third team that was Can AI Kick It was from the Netherlands, and Ashley was actually one of the team members, and he is going to tell you how they created their song.
Karin, thank you very much for that introduction. So indeed, although we didn't come in number one, we were still one of the entries that was appreciated by the jury and the voters. And as the Dutch team, I just want to talk to you a little bit about a process that we used on our team, but that is actually very similar to the process that many of the teams in the AI Song Contest used to end up with their entries. And what does that process look like in general? It really had, for our team, 3 streams. Most teams would have had at least 2 streams. One stream was for the music, one stream was for the lyrics, and then what was a little special about our team is that one stream was actually for an artificial voice. But the important thing to understand about it is that each of these streams started with a different set of data. That's the core of artificial intelligence. The output is usually only as good as the data you give it to learn from. And so we had, in this case, this excellent data set from the Dutch broadcasters of MIDI files of Eurovision winners, and this is key, Eurovision winners and Eurovision losers from the entire song contest that we could use to get a sense of what works well, what works less well at the Eurovision Song Contest. For the lyrics, it was similar. We had lyrics that worked well. We had lyrics that worked less well. We supplemented that with lyrics from the Metro Lyrics website. And because we were the Dutch team, also lyrics from some Dutch folk songs. And we added the melodies to those folk songs to the Eurovision MIDI files as well. So we could have a bit of local national flavor because we were at the end a Dutch team. And then the data set for the third stream was the voice of the artist. His artist is named Willy Wartaal. It is a very well-known hip-hop artist in the Netherlands. And so we had him record some of his own voice to help train our algorithm. So that was our input data. Then you have a step where it is the AI itself producing its output. So composing melodies, writing lyrics, and learning to sing, creating an artificial voice. There was a third step. I've labeled it with a question mark because it's really a co-creation step where you'd see many teams varying in how much of this was computers and statistics, how much of this was actually human intervention. But this would be a level where you'd select the best melodies that your AI composed. You'd select your favorite lyrics that your AI wrote. And of course, you have your artificial voice sing. And then the final step is completely human curated, where you bring all of these things that the AI has generated together into one whole. The one area where AI is still often really not good enough is that high level structure that makes an entire song make sense. And so most of the teams in the contest, including ours, did for this last step rely on a bit of human intervention just to do what you could think of as production to make the final track sound like a track that you wanted to listen to. Now, I want to focus on what my role in this team was. We were quite a large team. The Netherlands is very strong in computational musicology. I focused on selecting the winners, if you will, from the melodies that were generated by our AI composer. So what people often don't realize is that another very practical limitation of working creatively with AI is that AI never gets tired. AI never needs a break. It can generate 10 melodies for you, then 100, then 1,000, then 10,000, then 100,000. And if you want to work with an AI composer, you quickly realize you need to find some way to sort everything that it's writing to figure out what is the best and what is the worst. And to give you an example of we thought were some of our worst entries from our AI composer, we had a melody that sounded like this. It's fun, it's funky, but any of you who are watching who are singers will also immediately hear that this is nothing that you would ever want to be asked to sing. So what do you do to try to make this a little bit better and to try to help the algorithm learn what is a good Eurovision winner and what is not, what's a good melody and what is something that you want to leave aside. So we actually trained a separate AI system, so kind of a second AI to add to this whole pipeline, or fourth AI, if you will, to the whole pipeline, just to evaluate which melodies were stronger and which melodies were weaker. What was our training data? Again, we started with these MIDI files provided to us by the Dutch broadcasters, which again included, and this is key, both winners and losers. The second thing we did is took advantage of the fact that the European Broadcasting Union makes the voting data for every contest since the beginning public. We know exactly how many points every country awarded every other country, going all the way back to 1956. So the current scoring system, more or less, there have been many changes, of course, but the 12 point system started in 1975. We looked at all of the songs since 1975 and used a statistical model called the exploded logit model, which just based on the jury votes and the televotes estimates what was the underlying quality, perceived quality by the juries and the televoters for every single Eurovision song entry from 1975 through 2019. And then we added that to the data set we had from the Dutch broadcasters. That gave us a sense of what was good and what was bad. That was a bit more precise than just how many points did you end up with at the end of the contest. Then we used a toolkit called Fantastic that was developed by a British researcher named Daniel Meulensiefen. And Fantastic looks at MIDI files, and it looks at some fairly obvious things that we already had in the data set, like what is the key? Is it major or minor? What is the total melodic range? Is it large or small? But the special thing that Fantastic does is that it also looks at little fragments of every melody, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 note patterns. And it looks at their overall melodic shape and interval contour. It looks at a simplified version of their rhythm. How do we move from longer notes to shorter notes? And then, and this is really key, for every one of the melodic patterns, or these mini patterns inside a melody, it also looks at, is this kind of melodic pattern something that we've historically seen all the time at Eurovision? Is it a pattern that we saw in many of the melodies in this 200 song data set from the broadcasters? Or is there something really unique and unusual about a particular track? And that was actually our favorite feature for looking at, all right, if you want to predict what is a good melody or not, what is the relationship between these short melodic fragments and our estimation of the underlying jury preferences historically at Eurovision Song Contests. And then we used a model based on these features to look at melodies and bass lines separately. And we also did an analysis per section. So we looked at what was a melody and the bass line in the chorus, in the verse, in a bridge if there was one, and so on and so forth. In the end, our models simplified around choruses and verses. It was the easiest for artists to work with. If you're curious, by the way, in the data set, I said it had some winners and some losers. What was the worst song in the data set in terms of performance? So it was a song that actually has since become a fan favorite, but in terms of jury preferences, the worst song that we looked at in the data set was Joy Fleming's 1975 entry from Germany, Ein Lied kann eine Brücke sein. But in any case, let's move on. One other important thing to realize before I play the results of our algorithm for you is that we made one mistake, and it really was a mistake in terms of research, but in terms of the creative process turned out to be a blessing. So yes, this data set contained Eurovision winners and losers, but still everything in it was a melody that had made it in the end through a national final competition and was sent to the Eurovision Song Contest. Now, as you can imagine, many of the melodies that an AI composer generates would have never had a chance, like the example that I played for you earlier in this presentation, melodies that never would have made it to the Eurovision Song Contest at all. And if we really wanted to train our algorithm to detect what's a Eurovision winner versus a Eurovision loser, we needed to have not just Joy Fleming 1975, but actually a lot of melodies that never made it to the song contest at all. Because we didn't have that, our AI composer was encouraged, in the end by me, or my model, was encouraged to do some very funky and unusual things that made, we think, for a very interesting final product, but perhaps still weren't exactly what you'd think of when you think, oh yes, this is going to be the Eurovision winner in 2021 or 2022. But now let's talk about that model in a little bit more detail. What were, according to our model, what were the characteristics that led to Eurovision success for choruses and for verses, for lead melodies and for bass lines? So a very high level summary. So for leads in the chorus, surprisingly, we found that songs with a little bit of tonal ambiguity that were difficult to place just in a single key tended to perform better. On the flip side, rhythmically, we wanted things that were actually much more conventional. So it wasn't necessarily a simple rhythm per se, but rhythmic patterns that have appeared very, very frequently since 1975 at the Eurovision Song Contest. That's for the chorus. Within the verse, there actually was a bit more space for more unusual interval patterns. This makes sense if you think of songwriting. There's a bit more flexibility in the verse than there is in the chorus. And likewise, not just less predictable intervals, but also unusual melodic patterns in general. So if you looked at the chorus, you usually saw more typical melodic patterns. The verse was the space where there was a bit more room for a composer to be creative. If we look at the bass lines, then it's actually a slightly different story. Even in the chorus for the bass line, there seemed to be room, if we looked at Eurovision winners, for more unusual melodic patterns. Unsurprisingly, however, whatever the melodic pattern was, looping would be very characteristic of bass lines. And again, if you think of songwriting, of course, this makes very good sense. If we look at the verses, then the bass lines, they're often actually had just small leaps or stepwise motions. So in a sense, a more melodic bass line than usual, if you think about it, and also were characterized by somewhat shorter notes. What did all of this sound like? So you already heard one of the less successful melodies. Let's hear what our algorithm thought was one of the more successful melodies that our AI composer generated. So there are still some leaps, but it isn't quite as extreme. It's a bit more singable. Just to remind you, this came more toward the bottom of what our AI composer wrote. I'll jump ahead to bass lines. What was one of the more successful bass lines according to this prediction model that our AI composer wrote? And what was one of the less successful? So we really just have an octave leap and a semitone behind the key. Really kind of much less interesting in general. So we trained an AI composer, selected winners based on previous Eurovision success, underlying jury preferences. We had a model for lyrics. We had a model for an artificial voice. And finally, it all came together to be performed and produced by the human artist Willy Warthal. One other story that I'd like to share before I play our example for you was actually a very nice moment of surprise when we played Willy Warthal this AI-generated music for the first time. He was very excited by what he heard, but his immediate reaction was, oh, let me take a note out here, let me take a note out there, and then this is actually going to be a great melody. I could use this for a new track. Because it was an AI song contest, as a team, we had to ask him, Willy, actually, please don't do that. We're being graded on how much AI we actually use in this competition, so please leave the AI-generated melodies as pure as you possibly can. But if we think of the future for the music industry in general, I think we can also say that our artificially generated melodies were a huge success in the sense that, of course, in the real world, it would have been perfectly fine to adjust these melodies a little bit to make them fit, and they were immediately inspiring when we played them for a real-life artist. You're probably asking yourself, what did all of this sound like when you were done? And so to wrap up my section of this presentation, before we turn it back to Karen to talk about the AI Song Contest 2021, I just want to play you 30 seconds of the Abus Abus, our song from Can AI Kick It, the Dutch team, or one of the Dutch teams in the AI Song Contest 2020. this was also one of the melodies that AI generated bass lines.
Revolution, yeah. Hey, hey, hey. It's gonna feel good. It's gonna feel good.
AI generated.
It's gonna feel good, good, good. We want revolution, illusion, 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 illusion. There will be a day I look you in your eyes, and I'll hold you, hold you, hold you closer than I ever did. We'll be there. Hey, hey. Look at me, look at me. We're coming with the look.
So if you visit the AI Song Contest website, you can hear the whole thing. In the interest of time, I am going to turn things back over to Karen now. But of course, I'm happy to answer any questions about what we did after the session.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Yeah, so now that we already did a first edition of the AI Song Contest in 2020, we found out that actually a lot of people around the world are enthusiastic about this idea and wanted to experiment with it. So we decided to organize a next edition, and that's the AI Song Contest 2021. Actually, it is now open worldwide, so really teams from all over the world could enter. We have 38 entries this time. And we are continuing to explore the possibilities in human AI co-creation in this edition again. We are still inspired by Eurovision, but the teams don't have a Eurovision data set to use this time, so they can really use all data, can use all genres. And I can already tell you that the results from this year are also very, very surprising and very diverse. Actually, on Tuesday, on June 1st, they will all be published on this website, and you can listen to them, you can vote on them, and I hope you have a lot of fun listening to them. So thank you very much, and on to you, Wilfred, I think, with questions.
All right, thank you very much for that presentation and explanation of what AI Song Contest was about, and how it came about and how it's continuing. I definitely recommend people to check your website. And what I saw, actually, the deadline for handing in the songs is over, right? That was in May. Yeah. And now everything's gathered and then presented and people can vote, right? Okay.
Exactly,
Great.
Exactly, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I'm encouraging people in the chat actually to ask any questions they might have based on the presentation you gave. We'll keep an eye on that. Our team, Sophia, Carla, Isabel, and Irving, they're checking that. But they also might want to join the discussion themselves, right? While we do that, let me ask you first a question about the origin of your contest first, because I had the feeling, but correct me if I'm wrong, that initially it started as, I wouldn't say a joke, but let's say a funny alternative when the Netherlands had to cancel the 2020 Eurovision, right?
Oh no, I have to correct you in that. No, that's
okay,
it's not an idea that came about when we had to cancel. It actually came about in 2019, right after Duncan Lawrence won the Eurovision Song Contest.
All right.
I was working on some projects and especially thinking about new ideas around AI, and I came up with the idea, like, could we, as the Netherlands, win the Eurovision Song Contest again? And what would be necessary to do this? Could perhaps artificial intelligence help us create the ultimate Eurovision song and just win 2020 again? So it was actually in 2019 when this idea came about. But then I figured out very, very soon that no, AI is not able to create a winning song, but there are many people around the world working with this technique and music. And this was so interesting to hear what was happening that we thought, okay, let's create an alternative competition.
Yeah, okay. So that's good to hear, because then actually, let's say it being an alternative to the Eurovision Song Contest in 2020, that's something that just happened as a coincidence after it was canceled. And then people maybe found your website and said, oh, this is a nice alternative. We need a little bit of Eurovision somewhere.
Yeah.
Let's go there, right? Okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
Exactly.
Yeah. In a way, you're also hinting at saying, Karen, that we're using artificial intelligence as a tool already in many ways, let's say artistically, right? Maybe for making TV, for example, we're using artificial intelligence as a tool anyway. The question I was hinting at the beginning before your presentation was really assuming that in the future we might have a composer who is artificial intelligent, but that's not necessarily a tool, right? How would you make the difference? How would you describe the difference between artificial intelligence being a tool for TV making, art, music, and it may be developing into a very independent
I
thing
think
itself, right? Go ahead.
I think Ashley can really tell about the future, but for now and also for this competition, and also how we use it, for instance, in TV or in other stuff, it's really an inspirational tool. So for the AI Song Contest, I feel that the AI was always like a band member or one of the instruments. It's really something that you can add to your team. That sparks novel ideas that you can use, or you don't use them, you put them aside. It's really like an extra tool to create new stuff, and that's what we are actually interested in. And can we create new sounds, new ideas for these artists? Plus, what is interesting too is that we had teams with really musical people in it, and we had a lot of experience with it, but also teams who didn't have that at all and who were just curious to create some music, and actually had a way now to do that. So I think that was something that was very interesting to see. But I think Ashley can tell you more about the future in in 10 years. What are we going to see then?
Okay, let's talk about that as well. But maybe first I can link that to a question which we got from YouTube is, how do you determine which language to record for your AI song submission? So does the AI also decide that it's supposed to be in English by default?
I think last year we received, I think all the songs had the English language, yes. But for this year, for the 2021 edition, we encouraged teams to really use other cultural data sets. So we actually see a lot of songs in different languages. We have a Spanish song, there are actually multiple Korean songs. So there's a lot of cultural differences this year compared to last year. But yeah, of course, you're limited to the data, and I think English data is more obvious to use, or there is more of it.
Well, and I think one of the things, maybe actually you can respond to that as well. One of the things I noticed in the limitations that was mentioned is that the songs, when it comes to the lyrics, don't necessarily already make sense. So the system also needs to understand the language in the future to actually let the song make sense in the lyrics as well, right? Ashley, go ahead.
Yeah, so automatic language generation is a growing and actually with the new GPT systems, increasingly possible task. But historically, if you look at research in what's called natural language processing in general, there's been a very, very heavy bias toward the English language. And so especially if you're actually working as a user, not a researcher, you're in a certain sense kind of stuck. The tools for working with the English language are often just a lot stronger than they are for other languages. And if lyrics is just one thing you need to do while you're making an entry, it's very easy just to fall back on English. Of course, it's getting better, but you don't have to look any further than your virtual assistants, be that Cortana or Siri, or Google, to realize that the research in the English language is, for all kinds of reasons, just still often prioritized at the expense, unfortunately, of other national languages.
There we go. So we won't have Salvador Sobral's winning song for Portugal just yet, right? Created by artificial intelligence. Okay. Let me actually link that to a question that's being asked for both of you, and that is, did you find any resistance in the music community when you organized this competition? Did you get hate mail?
No, we didn't get hate mail. We do get a lot of questions, but I think that's good. I think this competition also helps to ask ourselves, what do we want AI to do? How do we want to collaborate with it? And what are the limits also? I think it's really good to talk about this topic, because AI can do so much, and it's everywhere really in our lives. And I think something creative like this really raises these questions. So yeah, and also of course in terms of rights, that's something that I'm really not invested in as for yet, but there are of course AI experts invested in this very much. The data sets that you use, the music that you use, is who owns the song? Is that the writer of the AI? Is that like all the songs or all the writers of the songs that you put into your algorithm? That's really a question that hasn't been answered yet. And so no, we didn't get hate mail, but it raises questions. Yeah.
It raises questions and eyebrows, right? Ashley, would you agree with that?
You know, for sure. I really expected, so one of the things that for me really tips the balance, I work with people who do music and AI all day, every day. So in that sense, there is no resistance. For us, it was more, do we have the time for yet another project? And then when we heard that we'd have the chance to work with a human artist in a co-creative environment, then, well, that answered the question, of course. But the first time we met Willy Wartaal, you know, big name in the Dutch music scene, I was really wondering, okay, what is this going to be like? And it was just such a pleasant surprise to see. Of course, artists are going to differ individually, but at least our artist thought that the entire process was just amazing and exciting, and was so open, not just to perform what we gave him at the end, but really to join our meetings all throughout the process and think along with us about what does it mean to make, what does it mean to teach AI to write music, and how that related to his own music making process.
Yeah, there you go. All right, let me link that to another question coming in from our YouTube chat, and that is Ivan asking, he's saying it's fascinating, but considering that all of the input data was humanly created, how much specifically AI generated material would you say ended up in the final product?
No, in our case, it's a really difficult, I always say, if you take, you know, the most extreme view, it isn't my view, but the most extreme view is that AI is just the most clever plagiarizing system you could ever come up with. You know, but is it really different than what we do as human songwriters when we say, oh, you know, yes, I was really influenced by previous Eurovision Song Contests when I was thinking of what I wanted to write as my song for this one. It's a really, really big gray area, and unfortunately algorithms don't give you you know, a clear label of, oh, I took, you know, this pattern from this song and this pattern from this song. It's much more sophisticated than cut it up and put it back together again. So even as the researcher who designed it, it's that question, although it is on one hand such an interesting question, even for us, at least for my team, it would be very, very difficult to answer the question. You'd have to do the same as you do with any other song, listen and say, oh yeah, I think I recognize that motive from Portugal 6 years ago. But you can't really do any better than that. It's no different really than evaluating a human composition.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, we saw a really big difference between the teams. Some teams generated content and really wanted to stick to that content, also have it performed by a computer actually. So if you listen to that song, it's perhaps harder to listen to, but it's also very fair. I think it says like, this is what the computer generated. Do you like it or not? And then the audience could evaluate, and yeah, okay, they rated very low because the audience didn't really like it yet. But that's also what is interesting in this competition. I think it's really about the collaboration between these musicians and these machines. And what you see, if this collaboration has gone well, then the teams actually score higher because it's more human, more emotional results.
Yeah, I'm going to link that to a question that's coming in from Isabel. Maybe Isabel, you can also go on screen then and ask your question. But first, maybe because Isabel and I have been having discussions about the nature of music, and let me summarize. Yeah, exactly. Let me summarize what I hear, because when Ashley is talking about it, a computer system learning all these different songs, decades of songs, and Karen said we need more than 200 songs so that the system really learn it. Not to insult anyone, but I see a little child learning about music step by step from the age of 0 to the age of 5 to 10. And I've had discussions with students about music actually being very mathematical. Deep down, music theory is mathematical. Yeah. And I know that some people would disagree with me. They would probably say, music is about experience, it's about putting that in, it's about feeling. That's something mathematics can never do. That's something a child at the age of 0 may not be able to do. But Isabel, I'm curious about your opinion on this, and then linking it to music students and the future for music students, right, who are used to more conventional ways of looking at music. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So my question was, what do you think will be the role of music students who study traditional composition? I mean, how do you perspective their role in a near future AI compositional environment? Do you think
That's something
that
for
they
you,
will...
Ashley. Oh.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to take that one. So,
Good.
although in many places, if not most places, conservatory education perhaps hasn't quite caught up to it. You know, I would say my expectation that AI is very rapidly, even for classical composers, is going to become just one of the standard tools, no differently than, so when Finale and Sibelius, you know, started as music notation, you know, did composers' handwriting get worse? I'm sure it did. Does anyone want to go back to the days when absolutely everything was done by hand? No. And I think it's going to be a similar thing. It's the co-creation aspect again that's so interesting. Right. Is human creativity going to be sucked out of the music industry? I certainly hope not, but I also don't think so. But is the new generation of composers going to be using AI? I think yes, and almost every day.
Yeah, I agree. I think it will definitely happen. But I'm just, you know, I was just trying to perspective some of the voices I know, you know, more old school musicians, you know, who will probably consider this as a threat, you know. And I think, well, as you, and curiously enough, I agree. I think that this will be a tool that will be used in a very near future for both popular music musicians and classical music musicians. And yeah, we'll see.
Can I ask you a follow-up question on that, Isabel, and maybe the others can respond to that as well? What was considered in the past a threat, but is now actually considered common standard, according to you?
Well, I think what was and still is a threat is music digitally, music, well, how can I put it in a synthetic way? Apps and the way that music became so accessible to everybody for free, you know. So the digitized world, although it made things much easier for many people, and in a way it democratized music production, I think. But on the other hand, it also had this side of putting everything out there, you know, so you just click and you have music there. So that, I think, was considered a threat, and I think it still is, because many musicians, particularly from the 70s and 80s, you know, who earned their money selling records and doing performances, I think they still feel a bit threatened. I mean, now it's a reality. They don't have to be threatened anymore because it's just there, you know. But I think that certainly was considered a threat and is still something considered well, negative, I would say, in that sense of devaluing, I think, the music in itself, and well, maybe composition, because there was no AI in those days. So, you know, I think people and musicians from that age, and from what I've interviewed and from what I've read throughout, particularly United States, England, old school musicians, 70s and 80s, if they weren't successful enough to live out of their revenues in these days, now it's difficult for them to survive, I would say. But I mean, that's just the way things have developed, right? So other than that, I don't really know what was considered a threat, you know, to come back to your question, right, Wilfred, and is not now a threat anymore. Like Karen said, I mean, I think that those I think it was Ashley, right, who mentioned the programs like Sibelius and everything. I think maybe musicians do not, you know, do not write music as well as they did, but they don't want to do it anymore, probably because they took hours and hours. So I would say that this too easy access to music and the effects it had on musicians' revenues is probably what was the biggest threat, which is not a threat anymore. It's just a reality.
Yeah, thank you very much. Before we move on actually in a bit to the musical interlude and the winner of last year's AI Song Contest, right? Sophia, there's something you'd like to add? Yeah.
I just want to add a little comment, because maybe it's just food for thought, not a question, but linking the Ivan question and his recent, very recent work and paper that we read about the kind of comparing AI intelligence music and the industrial way of composing. So maybe it's not so different, because this way of composing in the industry landscape, it's also based on patterns and references that people recognize, and so maybe a recipe for success. Because I compare this with food. You eat the same food for all life, so you will prefer this food. And sometimes we put just in different parts AI songs and other songs, and sometimes it's not so different, because people now are composing very strict to some patterns. So it's just a tiny comment, and try to link the interesting text of Ivan that talks about these kind of questions and how it's the geniality and difference in Eurovision. So yeah, thank you.
Hey, Karen, and actually I'll give you the last word on that based on what Sophia and Isabel said about it being maybe a threat or an opportunity, right? So let's hear it, and then we move to our musical interlude. Go ahead.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think it's an opportunity. It's really something that can. We see it now in this new edition. So many great, inspiring songs. I think it's really an inspiring tool to use.
Right.
And yeah, of course, I feel the same way. I mean, I think honestly, we're still in this very early phase of learning to master in the end what AI can do musically. And I imagine, especially actually for people who care the most about composing music that they love, really figuring out how to make an artificial system supplement everything that they're doing and come up with new ideas that really push the boundaries of their own human creativity. I think is actually such an exciting opportunity. It's going to be a great next couple of decades in music making.
Yeah, right. I must say I agree with both of you. I was just triggering the discussion because as I know much more people from old school learning procedures and everything, but I mean I agree, and I think it's fascinating too. I'm actually quite curious. I was really fascinated by the voice that you showed, Ashley, because I immediately, it reminded me of Drake, of Outline Blinks, and it was very similar. And, so as Sophia said, I think everything is now getting too close, and as we were discussing with our micros, even when we were not online yet, the lines between AI compositional procedures and normal or human are getting increasingly blurred. So I find it fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, now I invite you all actually to listen to last year's winner of the AI Song Contest, and indeed, Isabel, Karen, and John. This might be a starting point for what's coming in the future, and after that, we'll have a discussion about the future of Eurovision with several interesting guests. All right, let's hear it.
Finding feet, but love keeps on coming, flying. Dreams to live on the wings of
Wow, this is really a Eurovision banger from the AI Song Contest. Hello, back to the second day of the Eurovision Conference, and now we are talking with some very, very interesting guests about the changes in the Eurovision Song Contest, the forced ones, the necessary ones, and sometimes also disruptive ones. So let me welcome first Pedro Tatanka, who is still on his way. I think he will join us soon. Then I am happy to have Cesar Sampson with us. Hello, Cesar. Can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Hello, Cesar. Thank you for being with us. Thank you also for Ivor Little to be with us.
Nice to be with you.
Thank you, Dave Goodman, to join us in this interesting discussion.
Hello, nice to be with you too.
And our very special guest, and we want to celebrate, since this year we couldn't celebrate during the Eurovision Song Contest with him, Jon Olasand, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me, and good afternoon.
Hello. Jon Ola, this is a very different Eurovision Song Contest this year. The first one without you. So, but when you were starting 10 years ago as an executive supervisor and taking over from Svante Toxelius, what were the challenges lying ahead of you? Did you have a to-do list? What you have to realize to create in the Eurovision bubble?
Well, first of all, when you take over such an enormous task, being sort of on the top of Eurovision Song Contest, it's the first year I was just concentrating to get it on the right track, basically. Svante was working, as you know, the autumn of 2010, preparing together with the Germans. And I was in the Eurovision Song Contest reference group at that time. So I had followed the preparations. And right after Christmas, I took over. And as you can imagine, my first year, although I produced the show in Oslo in 2010, basically had to get it on, make sure that it stayed on track and that we had a successful edition in Düsseldorf. Then, of course, there was a lot of points on my agenda. But this is not a one-man show. And first of all, I needed to get acquaintance with all the Eurovision Song Contest partners, with the whole setup, with the different host, with the different participating broadcasters, and of course the next host broadcaster, which was Ihtimai TV in Azerbaijan, which was my second year in 2012. And Eurovision Song Contest is not an event where you do drastic changes or quick changes. It's like an oil tanker. It moves, to steer to a different course. You have to really use time. It's not a very elastic and movable event. And there's a lot of stakeholders that needs to be involved, not only from the EBU side, but all the participating broadcasters, the Eurovision Song Contest reference group, different bodies around the Eurovision Song Contest and the EBU system also needs to be involved. So actually it's not something you just jump on and then you start to change. But I think if we look back 10 years, the Eurovision Song Contest has gone through massive changes, and to my opinion, to the better. And some of them really wanted. We worked with some of them for many years, and some of them we could implement faster. But I think it's in good shape now, and I'm looking forward to follow the next 10 years of the Eurovision Song Contest from the sideline.
At what point do you know or do you understand that there is a change necessary?
Well, it's not something that just pops up, but when we decided to change the voting, like we did, not the presentation of the votes, like we did in 2016, we had worked on that for a long time actually, and we already tried to work out something like that in Oslo, where we wanted to split the results from the public votes and the jury votes. We didn't manage to do it. But using those years, you can get everyone on board. You can travel to the different broadcasters, talk to them, make sure that they understand the changes, and then you can implement it. So yeah, that's one example.
Well, you started in a period when there was a kind of concurrence among the host broadcasters to make it bigger and bigger, to have more people accredited, to have bigger arenas, to have bigger press centers. How did you manage to tell them, size down a little bit, calm?
That's actually very difficult. In the first meetings I have with the new host broadcaster, that's always what we say and what I say. You know, you don't need to make it bigger. You just need to make a really good setup, and you need to make 3 really good shows out of this, but you don't need to do it bigger. But there is a certain logic here that host broadcasters, although they are quite shell-shocked, I must say, in the first meetings, because they have this enormous event just, you know, coming into their garden, but although they are afraid of it, and they're afraid of the costs, they're afraid of the size of it, can we do it, can we manage to do it, they often decide to go for a larger scale production rather than a scaled down production. Although we have examples like in Portugal, in Lisbon, we made the less expensive Eurovision Song Contest since I started, and it was a fantastic one. So you don't necessarily need to make it bigger, but it is a difficult task when you talk to the host broadcasters. It is.
So we're very happy to have such a big figure in Eurovision with us. So if you have questions, use our social media channels, use Facebook, use YouTube, and ask your questions to Jon Ola Sand and to our other guests. Otherwise, I will go on. I have lots of questions left. For example, the period where you were in charge for Eurovision was also a very difficult period concerning the positions of the public broadcasters. You have, within the EBU, you have public broadcasters who have, like the BBC, let's say, the ideal of bringing public value to the people. Then you have other broadcasters, like ICTMI maybe, that are closer to the government. How do you manage to put them all together and to follow the same guidelines?
Well, you're correct. There's a lot of public broadcasters in Europe that are in a very strained financial situation or political situation. They face challenges with technology, and all this we have to overcome when we engage with them to do Eurovision Song Contest, especially for a host broadcaster. I mean, it is challenging, but it's important that we can demonstrate what we can do together. They're not doing it alone, and it's a very simple rule. You follow the rules of the Eurovision Song Contest, and if you host it or if you participate, and those we have a very elaborate set of rules that ties it all together, and there are some very strict and clear guidelines there that you have to adhere to. So we can allow you to host it. And that's also when it comes to the political side of it. We cannot have any political interference in the programs. And we often have to do these talks very sort of clear and frank and open and sharp in the start of the conversation. And that might also include certain individuals from the government and from the city to make them understand that we have a set of rules. All broadcasters have signed up to these rules, and this is how we're going to perform it. And that's why I'm there constantly over the year to supervise them, to make sure that they follow the rules of the Eurovision Song Contest, and that we can have a Eurovision Song Contest that as it should be. But then again, we give them a lot of freedom to create their own content around the competition. The competition is very sort of, it's in the center of Eurovision Song Contest. But around that, there is a lot of good content that the host broadcaster produce, which sort of reflects the city, the country, where they can showcase their musical favorites, their artists. That's where we give them a lot of freedom to make sure that we have the flavor of the country. And that's the good thing about Eurovision Song Contest. It always pops up with a new flavor. And I've also put a lot of focus on that to strengthen that. It's important that when it comes from Portugal, it doesn't look like a show coming from Stockholm.
Mm-hmm. This goes perfectly with the question we are getting now from YouTube. Alvaro is asking, after so many years at the helm of the festival, what have you learned from Eurovision, Jon Ola?
That's how much time do we have? It's a very difficult question, but of course, learn a lot about how diverse Europe is, how different. There's a lot of different mindsets around Europe. They are thinking differently. Germans are Germans, Swedes are Swedes, the Portuguese are very Portuguese, but they all go into this with a will to host a successful Eurovision Song Contest and to put all their mind behind it. But there are some challenges traveling around Europe, and every year meeting a new broadcaster with a totally different view on how to set up a show like this, how to produce a show, how to do the logistics around it, what kind of people you choose in your team, and all of that. And then you have to be a diplomat. You cannot be in my position without being a true diplomat. You cannot come there and point at them and say you do it like this and this and this. You have to make them understand how it should be done. Although you have to be strict, you have to be clear, they have to follow the rules, but you have to be a true diplomat. So that's maybe something that I've learned over the last 10 years.
I see. So as a diplomat now, you are, I think for you are happy not to be in charge anymore, because now we are facing a very tricky situation with a Belarusian public broadcaster. So maybe I would also invite Dave Goodman, who is responsible for the communication of the EBU and the Eurovision Song Contest, to talk about the position of the EBU in this particular situation. And maybe you can also discuss together, Jon Ola and Dave. Dave, what is actually, maybe you can explain to the viewers outside what's happening to the Belarusian broadcaster?
Well, yeah, on Friday, the executive board of the EBU met, which is made up of members, representatives of members of the EBU, and they voted to suspend the Belarusian broadcaster BTRC. And now BTRC have 2 weeks, according to the statutes of the EBU, to respond to that. But the suspension means that BTRC cannot participate in any activities of the EBU during the time they're suspended, which would include the Eurovision Song Contest and also the Junior Eurovision Song Contest. But there's many other services of the EBU that BTRC and all members participate in, not least the news exchange. So that's the situation that we're in at the moment with the Belarusian broadcaster.
Mm. We are facing talking about change, a lot of changes in the political landscape. We have now the situation with Belarus. We have other countries in Europe that have problems with their public broadcasting system. How difficult is it to manage these situations within the project Eurovision? I'm thinking about Hungary, Poland, the Czech Republic, where the public broadcasters are endangered.
It's very difficult. It's a very difficult union of public broadcasters because we're a membership organization, of course. So all these broadcasters pay to be members of the EBU. But of course, they also, when they join the EBU, sign up to the values of public broadcasting and freedom of speech, plurality of voices, particularly news coverage, are important values of public broadcasting. And so when dealing with these different members around Europe, that is always front of mind. And of course, our policy, as with many international organizations, is to work with these broadcasters, is to work with these countries rather than to exclude them. And so it is a challenge in many different countries where public broadcasting is under threat, and we work to strengthen and support public broadcasting where we can, and we have dialogue with those members in countries you've just mentioned, particularly at the moment in Poland, in Hungary, and none of this is behind closed doors. This is what we campaign for publicly as well. And obviously we've had a lot of dialogue in recent weeks and months with Belarus, with BTRC, but sadly that dialogue right now has not led to any changes in terms of the broadcaster and in terms of the values and what is being done on BTRC right now. So that has led to the suspension. But it is important for the EBU to work with the members. And as Jon Ola can attest to, there's been a number of challenges within the Eurovision Song Contest as well over the years in regards to the politicization, the instrumentalization, and we saw that with Belarus this year. And it's difficult to make those decisions, but there are lots of systems in place to deal with that, not least the reference group, which Jon Ola's referred to, which is again made up of members of the EBU, representatives of the participating broadcasters, who have to make those decisions and look at each song in its own right and what is presented to the EBU as an entry, and that's what happened this year with Belarus.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we're going to see other public broadcasters being suspended in the near future?
Well, I can't speak to that, unfortunately. I mean, I work solely on the Eurovision Song Contest now, but obviously it's really important. The public broadcasting is really important, and where it is under threat, the EBU has to act, and obviously we're under pressure as well to make sure that we are true to our own values. And it is difficult when you have public broadcasters who do not fulfill the values of the EBU and of the public service media. So this hasn't happened before in regards to suspension based on values and based on the news coverage that BTRC, and particularly in terms of videos that they've shown in the last week. But yes, it's something that's definitely a focus now of the EBU, and definitely a focus of the DG Noel Curran and the executive board to make sure that we enhance and strengthen public broadcasting, and that will mean sometimes difficult conversations and difficult actions.
Going back to Jon Ola, there is a question that I would like to put in this context. I mean, when you started, and then you had Azerbaijan winning, then you had Ukraine winning, with all the political implications and all the problems that arose for you and the reference group out of that. Did you ever expect this to develop in this way at that time?
Well, not really. We were prepared that Azerbaijan would be a complicated ride. We knew that, both because of the structure with the broadcaster and the broadcaster's ties to the government, and also with the general political situation in Azerbaijan. So that so that was quite complicated. But what we did back then was to ask for a meeting as high as we could, and I had a meeting with the First Lady of Azerbaijan, and I very clearly put on the table the rules for the contest. Also clearly said that that we are here because ICTMI TV, a member of the EBU, participated in the song contest. And it's under the responsibility of ICTMI TV and the EBU to host the song contest here. If we cannot do it according to the rules, unfortunately, we have to move it to another territory. And very simple and clear message that worked. We have I had excellent relation to the public service broadcaster in Azerbaijan. We worked very well in Baku. There was a lot of NGOs, there was a lot of other political entities around Europe that was watching us, was watching the situation in Azerbaijan, which then again gave a good spotlight on the situation in Azerbaijan. But I think we managed to host 3 good shows out of Baku with a lot of effort from both the city of Baku, the government there, and a lot of professionals from all over Europe. So, but you're never prepared to enter into all these discussions. But we experienced after Eurovision Song Contest in Azerbaijan that we have at the very early stage to be very clear, these are the rules, this is how we play. And we did the same in Ukraine. And although that was also a very difficult ride for many reasons, we also managed to do it there safe and without any sort of big implications on the political side.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the EBU will need to enforce more the non-politicalness of the contest because the real world's becoming more and more political?
I think what we have in place now is sufficient for the time being. All the members, as Dave said, all the members participating in Eurovision Song Contest, they agree on these rules. They want it this way. They don't want a political contest. We have a reference group that is guiding, meeting 7 times a year, you know, overlooking the preparations, everything that happens, and also the political side. And again, it is possible to put that much pressure on the broadcasters that if they cannot follow the rules, if they try to politicize it, if they try to do something else than we supervise them to do, well, then we can walk out of there.
So a comment from Simon from Poland. He thanks for the remarks on questionable public broadcasters. Common values are more important than the number of participants of the ESC or the members of the EBU. However, of course, it is a common project of the public broadcasters. You are sharing special ideas also of public value. I mean, attending to minorities is very important for the BBC, and it should be part of the policy of every public broadcaster. But when we see that some countries withdraw from the contest because Eurovision is attending too much for minorities, what do you tell them?
Well, I don't think we really have seen that. We have no sort of concrete evidence that any of the broadcasters have pulled out because of this and that. It could be a financial situation that leads to sort of a break for a year or two, like Bulgaria did, like Croatia did, like other broadcasters. There could be a part of a general, more complicated political situation, like with the Turkish broadcaster, which has much more to do with the situation between Turkey and the rest of Europe than Eurovision Song Contest itself. They never came to us with a clear message. Neither did the Hungarian broadcaster. And I mean, still now this year, with 42 signing up, unfortunately not all of them participating for reasons we know, it still stands very strong. And I think the system we have in place now and the sort of elaborate conversations that EBU has with all the broadcasters throughout the year on many different subjects, not only the Eurovision Song Contest. We know our members well. So in my opinion, this is sufficient. But then again, I'm not taking the lead for the next 10 years. So I'm sure they will be working on this as well from the new team at EBU.
when we talk about the Eurovision Song Contest, at least in the German media, it is always referred to as a composers contest, since originally in the rules of Eurovision it was written that the purpose was to promote high quality original songs in the field of popular music by encouraging competition among artists, songwriters and composers. The current set of rules mentions only that the show is a state-of-the-art world-class television production consisting chiefly of successive live televised performances of songs. To what extent was this a necessary change in the rules of the Eurovision Song Contest?
Well, I think you have to make a world-class television show, or 3 world-class television shows, in order to have or to say, in order to have a Eurovision Song Contest that is so massively popular, that reaches out to so many people. You need to have more than it's more than a song competition. It's about staging, acting, artists. The whole event itself is much more than just a bunch of songs coming together. But having said that, I think you can see, if you go back and you have the last 10 years winners, and you see there are so many good songs only there. And if you dive into all of those songs that has participated, you will see massively good songs, I would say, and a lot of them. So it's still important to have a good song, and it's still important to have good composers composing that song. But it's so much more than just a song competition. It is really a TV show, and one of the few that is made for TV, terrestrial TV, and with all the spin-off that it has around it. But it's so much more than just a song competition. So I think that change was necessary. That was, however, done before my time.
I see. So when we're talking about composers and musicians, of course, now we want to see and hear the view of one of them, Caesar Sampson. Thank you for being with us. Caesar, do you feel that Eurovision is more a TV show, or is it more a chance for you as a composer and musician to show your talent?
I would say I came to Eurovision and I participated in Eurovision because I loved Eurovision. And my first year there was actually 2016. I was part of the Bulgarian team. So me going to Eurovision in 2018 was actually more a result of me falling in love with Eurovision as a complete idea and just my love for this kind of stage. So I would say Eurovision is first a show, a cultural event, and then secondarily for me it was also a very good opportunity to present myself and my music to a broader audience, of course. But I would say the specificity of it being in Eurovision was for me the decisive factor.
You are part of Symphonics International, a collective that is regularly submitting songs to the Eurovision Song Contest for various countries, organizing songwriting camps, and they have an impressive output and an impressive success in Eurovision. How does this reflect the general changes in the music business?
There's all the time changes in the music business, especially with the changes in media and the subsequent habits of the average music listener. But a part of that in Eurovision, there was definitely a change. There was, I don't know where it started or how it started, but there's an increased desire for Eurovision to be relevant, to kind of gel with all these new tendencies, also with the youth and different generations and stuff like that. So when we as a team picked up on that tendency, on that new direction, of course that inspired us to contribute to that direction. We wanted to heighten the level of production. We wanted to invest more care and love and go away from the practice of just sending songs around. There was always a tradition of producers and producer collectives to send songs to different delegations and offer their songs. to be picked up, but we wanted to take it one step further by directly contacting the the artist that the delegation maybe already had in mind, and kind of connect with them from the get-go and craft something with them. And that for us has made all the difference. And that I think was the main factor why we had a lot of success from the moment that we understood that.
In our keynote, we were talking about the use of artificial intelligence for composing. What you, as a composer and producer, are thinking about the use of artificial intelligence? Are you maybe already using it?
I wouldn't know, because there is so many ways that artificial intelligence can enhance or could enhance. I could think of a number of ways that you could use it in, also in just getting more like effects and programs to respond differently to what you want, and more intuitively, especially. So I don't know where we are technologically and how many of the leading manufacturers have picked up on that and included AI. So I'm not in any way an authority on that topic, but I wouldn't be surprised if I would already be using it to a certain degree. I'm not consciously using it though. I'm still very much an old school guy. I like writing the core of a song on the bus and somewhere far away from anything technological. And I think, if anything, AI can assist you in getting yourself more removed from the technological and from all the hardware, and just kind of interface with these new options on a more intuitive level. That's what I hope.
Okay, so now I'm handing over to my colleague Carla Figueira. She had gathered some questions from the panel and from online. Carla?
Would you like me to ask the questions?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I actually had one personal question, and I'll make use of the opportunity for Jon Olasand. Is when can we expect the book of his insights?
I won't tell you. I'm not sure there will ever be a book, to be honest. I've experienced a lot of situations during those years, but maybe they are best to keep them for myself. But who knows? Let's see. For the time being, there are no plans for a book.
Okay, thank you. We will always be in the expectation.
Good. Never know.
Thank you very much. So yes, we have a few questions from YouTube. And actually, I'll start here with a question that is for all panel members. From Simon Stelmatsky, and I apologize for mispronouncing. So few questions. So it is, how to establish really independent juries with no direct link to broadcasters and fixed or predicted results in so many cases. So the question really around independence of juries.
I can start here. This is quite difficult, but every year we scrutinize the juries and every jury member. It has to be submitted to the EBU, and the EBU is looking at this together with our audit partner, which is Ernst & Young. And we try to find any ties to any broadcaster, any artist, any composer, to make sure that they are individuals that can vote independently. So that's a lot of work that the EBU puts into this every year. And then it is in the hands of the participating broadcaster to pick the right jury members. And all of these broadcasters are members of the EBU, and they are participating, and they have an interest of having a fair competition. So it is as good as it gets, I think, because we also need to attract professional people, and professional people are working around Europe with different artists, different composers, record labels. So it is quite complicated. I think we manage as well as we can, but I don't know if anyone else would like to chip in on this.
David? Dave Goodman, would you like to add anything?
Jan summed it up quite well. I mean, it's up to the broadcasters who take part, and you have to remember that this is a co-production. We have a host broadcaster, or three in the case in the Netherlands, but normally one, who take a lot of the work and obviously put on the show, but everyone else is producing the show too, all the other 39, 40 broadcasters, and we rely on them to follow the rules and rely on them to be honest and to scrutinize as well, and to present a jury that can be fair and balanced and can judge the songs and in line with the rules. And as Jan said, it is scrutinized. When we get the lists of jurors, they are looked at centrally and audited, and changes sometimes are required and asked for as well. But we do rely on our members to do that, and to make sure that the jurors are all following the rules and they're all music professionals. But it's challenging because you've got to find new jurors every year. I think the rule says, and don't quote me, but I think they can't sit on the jury 2 consecutive years. I think there has to be a space between the time they've been on the jury. So you've got to find 5 people every year from your country. So it can be a bit of a challenge to make sure you got the right skills on that jury.
Well, the outcome of the contest is not only depending on the juries, it's also depending on the audience, and the audience is sometimes influenced by the commentators. So now I would ask Ivor Little, who is responsible for the commentators' briefing. Hello, Ivor.
Good afternoon, Irving.
I remember when the commentators' briefing roughly consisted of telling them how to pronounce the names of the participants properly. Which changes have you implemented since you are briefing the commentators?
Well, we still inform them how to pronounce everything properly, but we do it digitally. They used to be like they had their 50 minutes of fame where they would stand up and pronounce the names of their composers or their songwriters or their artists. That has sadly gone. A lot of people loved it, but it's the pronunciation guide is still there. What we have introduced into the commentators briefing is much more an opportunity for the host broadcaster to sell the show, to sell the concept of the show to the commentators, to present their ideas and their interval acts and what is behind them, how the postcards are really the most important aspect of the Eurovision Song Contest for the commentators. That's what they use to speak over. So they need to know what's in the postcards and what the viewers are seeing and what's behind it.
But sometimes the songs want to convey messages that they don't openly say that they want to convey it. I'm thinking about, for example, Jamala's 1944. So do you need to inform the different commentators about these backstories that they can inform their audience properly?
No, we would never, neither the EBU or the host broadcast would never instruct the commentators what to say or what not to say. That's purely up to them, and they are all individuals, they're all professionals, and they have done their research. And that's what's, I think, a crucial part of the songcast. Every commentator will have a different commentary on a completely different aspect of things. And the idea, I think, for the commentator is people tune in for much of the time to listen to the commentator and as much as to see the show, because it's like a big party. And if you are invited to a party and you know there's going to be someone there that you know, and in this case it's the commentator, then you're much more likely to go to that party.
I see. Well, we have in the past seen some famous and also unfamous commentators in the Eurovision Song Contest influencing their audience for a long period. I'm thinking about Terry Wogan in the UK. I'm thinking about Ado Schlier in Germany.
Yeah, it's the question. They have tried to influence their audience, but how successful have they been? Terry Wogan gave an image to the contest in the UK, which was probably much more important than what he actually influenced. I don't think he ever influenced anyone to vote or to vote against anyone, but he did give this, shall we say, a little bit of fun element to the contest, which sadly went maybe the wrong way in some cases. So a lot of people think that it's just a laugh, but of course those days are gone, and sadly Sir Terry has also gone.
Do you think that there is something to change about this? I mean, do you see that there's a new generation of commentators, that they have different approaches since you are doing this job?
I see different approaches from every commentator, and there's definitely new generations. If you look at the UK, you have Graham Norton, who is a very popular presenter in the UK, but unlike Terry, I think he would never get tired of the contest. He loves it so much, and he actually promotes it actively throughout the year. So, but his commentaries are light-hearted, but also very, very supportive of the contest.
I see that Caesar is having a question.
Yeah. If we're already talking about influencing the televoters, I was recently hearing about a rumor. I don't know how substantiated and how true it is, but what about the influencing of televoters by the betting odds? Now we're talking about, I heard about Malta and the Maltese broadcaster allegedly influencing the betting odds somehow. How would you go against that, or how would you punish that if it turned out to be true? Anybody want?
I can start there, but I actually have no knowledge about this. So I've seen the rumors and I've heard about it, and I kind of, could be, I don't know, but I have no knowledge about that, and it's difficult for EBU to be in a position to handle something, to act on that. But this is a bit out of my focus now, and I was not confronted with this in my years as the executive supervisor. I don't know if Dave has any comments to this.
It's interesting. I got asked. Sorry, I got asked about this by the Dutch broadcasters who were reporting on betting, and they were talking to me about how the betting odds set, as if the EBU set them, and the EBU decided who the favourites were. And I had to explain that it's nothing to do with the EBU, that bookmakers set their own odds, and they are decided on by who's spending money and where people are placing their money. And if there was a case where there was countries doing that, it's outside the EBU's remit, really, although there are rules about bringing the contest into disrepute that could be used in this case. But with regards to anything that's happened this year, there's nothing really to comment on, and it would have to be brought to the EBU's attention. And so we can't comment on speculation. I know you'd expect someone from communications to say that, but it's interesting because it is really outside what the EBU does and controls. But it's an interesting point because there's a lot of interest in winning Eurovision. There's a lot of interest in the betting odds and going into the event, where the commentators, as Ivor's just mentioned, commentators talk about who is leading the odds and who are the favourites. So it does make a difference to how the audience perceives the contest, certainly.
I believe there's an inquiry. Sorry, Caesar. I believe there's an inquiry being launched tomorrow in Malta to find out how the 650,000 promotion budget was used, and if some of that money was used to influence the betting. So there may be some results from that inquiry.
I was just interested in if it's like illegal according to the rule book of the EBU to do that, to invest money in yourself and bet on yourself and inflate and boost your own betting odds, and what the punishment is, or if there is any procedure in place if that turns out to be the case.
Well, as Dave said, there is a section in the rules that you cannot put the Eurovision Song Contest in disrepute, which means or in a bad light, or do something that could harm the Eurovision Song Contest. But I think this is very difficult to track down, and there are also elaborate, the rules have many sort of ways of reacting towards a broadcaster if the broadcaster is in breach of the rules. But how this is looked upon now on this case, I don't know, really, I don't know. But there are plenty of ways that EBU can react towards their members when it comes to the rules of the song contests. So, yeah.
I have here a question from Ko Jun, the very talented pianist who did our interlude yesterday with all the participating songs of this year's song contest on the piano, a very interesting mashup also. And he's having a question about copyrights, all the logos and the design. How are these protected, and can we use those for private videos for YouTube? Because you see that some, Eurovision fan pages essentially are based on EBU stuff.
I think you could chip in here, Dave. Yeah.
I was going to say the answer is no. It's basically, but like everything on the internet, it's impossible to chase down everything that appears. The logo, the official logo, is owned by the EBU, and the theme art every year is owned by the EBU and the host broadcaster who designs it. And only the EBU, the host broadcaster, and their partners are allowed to use it, or licensees, so sponsors, for example. So no is the answer, that it shouldn't be allowed, it shouldn't be used. And that is one of the challenges actually on the online world, is to see where people have used it, and also that the consumer is seeing the use of the logo, and it might assume that what they're looking at is official. We had that actually this year with Twitch, which is a big challenge. Twitch is a sort of a gaming platform where people watch or game together, and a lot of people are watching Eurovision on there, which again shouldn't be, is not allowed. And when people ask for permission, they're denied it, but people still do that. And the Twitch channel appeared this year that looked like it was the official channel, and was even mentioned in a report about our social media. So it's very difficult, but the answer is no. Only officially licensed people can use the logo, and we're very strict on that where we do find breaches of that.
I see. So, but the development of all the social media and internet 0.2 was a new challenge that EBU had to face. So did you have to form a special task force only to deal with that? And what are you expecting for the future?
Well, online is massively important for us. I mean, this year it exploded. We had a huge reaction online in terms of the engagement. We had, I think it was 3 times as much engagement on Twitter this year as we had in Tel Aviv in 2019, 5 times as many video views on Instagram as we saw last time. 8 million people reached on Instagram this year, 21 million people reached on Facebook. So the online platforms, and we launched TikTok this year, and that's got 500,000 followers already, and millions more who were reached by TikTok. Really important for the song contest, really important for the brand, really important to sort of take people backstage, behind the scenes of the TV show, but also massively important to reach young audiences. And we certainly did that this year. If you look at the numbers that we're actually releasing some tomorrow. So I've given you a bit of a sneak preview of some of the numbers that we'll be releasing tomorrow when we release the ratings for this year. But actually, young audiences are watching Eurovision in huge numbers now. It's totally reinvigorated the competition, and we might well, see that in the fact we've had a very young winner this year, a young group of people with a very young sound. But getting through to young audiences, keeping the contest fresh, getting through to them through the channels where they are, particularly on TikTok and Instagram, reaching new audiences who don't necessarily follow the channels, might not know about Eurovision, but they're going to be presented with video on those channels because of things like Instagram Reels and TikTok, which presents video to people. It's really important for the EBU because those people are the audiences of the future. And in a world where linear television watching is declining, although not necessarily for the Eurovision Song Contest, as we'll see tomorrow, in that world where people are increasingly watching on demand, say for Netflix, the fact that this show is still relevant and still attracting young people every year, new audiences is really important. And I know today we talked about where will Eurovision be in 50 years, in 100 years. Well, I'm confident that it will still be around because every year, young people find it. You know, kids, even my niece watched it for the first time this year, 7 years old, loved it. So when new audiences find this event, they love it and they come back year on year. And that's really reassuring for everybody who's attending today because we love this show. It's 65 years old and we need to have people watching who are going to watch for another 65 years.
But this is a very crucial question that you are, when you're talking about the forced change, we have the forced change caused by the demographic change. If we look to the average age of the public broadcasters, I think it's 60 plus all over the place. And in 10, maybe 20 years, most of the audience of the public broadcasters will not be watching anymore, or will not be able to watch anymore, let's say.
Sorry to interrupt. That is why actually this year and in recent years, we have been reaching young audiences, and actually 4 times as many people between 15 and 24 watch the Eurovision Song Contest than would normally watch those public broadcasted channels. So what this show does is bring those hard to reach young audiences to those public channels. And when they come to watch public television for the Eurovision Song Contest, they then can touch the rest of the network and the rest of the content that the public broadcaster is providing. So this show, as Jon Ola would also attest to, is massively important for public broadcasting in Europe because it brings that hard to reach demographic to those channels. So not only online, although 50 million people watched something on YouTube during the week on our official YouTube channel, but also that 52% of 15 to 24-year-olds watching television last Saturday night were watching the Eurovision Song Contest. That is huge. And as I say, 4 times as much as the average for those channels.
Yeah, but Eurovision is a brand of the organization of the public broadcasters. What happens if there is no audience for the public broadcasters anymore and they are threatened in some countries? Where it is going to survive? Who is going to keep the Eurovision tradition alive?
Well, we would hope that with the help of the EBU and obviously with everything we do and everything that's done domestically by the public broadcasters, that public broadcasting will survive, and that it's massively important that it does survive. It's hugely important in every country that there is public service media. That is what we do the rest of the time when we're not concentrating on the song contest, is supporting that. So we hope it will survive. I mean, it's hard to future gaze, but the Eurovision Song Contest as a brand and as a show will also survive. And God forbid if public broadcasting does not, and we all hope that it does, I think the Eurovision Song Contest will also survive and who knows how, but people are still wanting to gather and watch television together. And although it's a very fragmented television market now with people watching on demand when they want to, what we see from sport particularly, which is also important to stay on public channels to be free to air, and with the Eurovision Song Contest, is that people do want these unifying experiences. People do want to gather. And public television offers the only platforms right now where you can do that, where you can bring an audience together because you don't have to pay for this show. It's there on public television. And it was interesting, I got an email. No, it wasn't an email, so it was a phone call. I got a lot of interesting phone calls on the night of the grand final to the press number. And somebody was complaining that they didn't know how to vote in the Eurovision Song Contest because they didn't know how, and they were watching online. And it's like, well, if you watched public television, you'll see how to vote because it's there on the public television channels. And someone else complained that they couldn't watch online because they didn't pay their license fee in the United Kingdom. And the BBC didn't want it to be shown on YouTube because it was obviously on the iPlayer there. And they were complaining they could no longer watch Eurovision because they didn't because it wasn't online and they weren't going to pay their license fee. So it's interesting that people, always say they don't want to pay for public broadcasting, but then when something like the Eurovision Song Contest appears and they can't watch it, or they don't know it's on public broadcasting, they soon start complaining. So it's reaching people everywhere on different channels, but it will survive. It will survive, and we hope public broadcasting will survive, but Eurovision certainly will.
Well, you're also making Eurovision survive by developing new formats, new online formats. I think of Eurovision Again, or yesterday we saw the Eurovision Song Celebration live on tape. These might not attract a mass audience, but obviously they find their viewers. Are these only Eurovision fan dreams come true, or is this as part of a strategy? Who is driving the change within the EBU and the reference group?
Well, it is part of our digital strategy. I mean, it's something that I look after in my role, is the content on all the digital channels, but with a very strong team of people who love, respect, and really invest in this. And it's really important for us, and it became part of our strategy when Ionola was still in the executive supervisor role, to engage people all year round. So it was really important for all the followers that come to us during the event week, and there are hundreds of thousands, maybe millions who start following our channels. We want to keep them on the channels throughout the rest of the year. And so it's important to provide content through that time, including things like the song celebration, Eurovision Again, which was a response very much to the pandemic, of course, and everyone being at home last year, and there being the cancellation of the song contest. But we're always looking for ways that we can keep the excitement going throughout the year, and that is part of our strategy. And yes, there's a very niche group of people who want to do that and want to follow all year round. But every year there are new fans, as we've said, and every year there are people who discover that this is not just a show that turned up on their televisions last week. This has been going for 65 years, and there is huge amounts of archive, huge amounts of songs, huge amounts of great television to discover. And so using that archive, making it relevant, making it interesting for a young audience, and for all audiences, but particularly young audiences, is really important for us.
And you're getting a young audience, as we can see in the chat. Petra is telling she has already convinced her niece to be a fan of the Eurovision Song Contest. And Karjun is saying that every year he's trying to bring his friends to watch Eurovision, and he feels that they avoid him when it's getting close to the ESC. But this year, 2 friends found it awesome. So this is a positive development. Sophia, do you have gathered some other questions from our panel and from the internet?
I take a question from Carla Figueira, our colleague. I know that Carla Figueira was very interested to know about these new strategies of, trying to pass by the difficulties of pandemic situation, like the Eurovillage online. What you can say us about this new Eurovillage, because I know that Eurovillage was in the past a way of bringing together people that traveled to the cities to be on the Eurovision Song Contest, as well as people living in the cities. It's a place to gather all people together. So how about this experience?
Well, the Eurovillage this year, which went digital for the first time, it was very much the initiative of the city of Rotterdam, because of course, they are a massively important part of the equation, and one of the main stakeholders when we host a Eurovision Song Contest is the host city themselves. They very much invest emotionally and certainly financially in the event. And this year, because Rotterdam couldn't regrettably attract people to come, obviously people did travel for the event, including members of the press, but not in the numbers that a normal host city would see. And obviously there were restrictions on gathering in the Netherlands as well while we were there, so they couldn't have a physical Eurovillage. So they very much decided that they wanted to bring Rotterdam to the world via online, and they decided to do an online Eurovision Village. That was their initiative that we fully supported and promoted, but it would be up to the next host broadcaster, which is RAI in Italy, to decide whether they wish to continue with that for next year.
Yeah, great. I have also another question. It's both from, I can't remember the name, on the chat, as well as our friend Wilfred, for Caesar, about your experience on Eurovision in Lisbon. I'm in Lisbon, and Isabel as well. So what about this experience? Because we are talking about gathered together different people. So how about your experience in Lisbon and in the Eurovision bubble?
For me, it was quite interesting to compare Lisbon to the two Eurovision editions I've been part of before that, especially because, as Jon Ola said, it was without certain elements that are usually in terms of staging. We didn't have an LED wall. It was very much pared back, which changed the challenges also from our team in putting up the show for my song. So it was interesting to compare it to the year before in Ukraine and the year before that in Sweden. But it was altogether a really interesting experience because it told me that while it is very practical to have as many tools as possible, it's not necessary to put on an impressive show, and it's not necessary to put on a good show. So I would say my Lisbon experience, my ESC experience was really, really, really good, aside of the fact that I did well there. And also Eurovision, as also Jan Ola, I think, said, is always different depending on where it is. So the culture of the host country comes very much into the picture, and I'm a huge fan of Portugal, and I just enjoyed that kind of flavor to Eurovision, and I preferred it definitely to Ukraine for my personal reasons. I always had a good time in Portugal. I had great concerts before that in Portugal. The people are very warm-hearted and very enthusiastic about music, and I could feel that throughout the whole event.
Mm-hmm. If you don't mind, I'd like to add to that, because the question that I came up with, I'm just wondering what it's like, because when we hear David talk and Jon Ola talk, they're basically planning, let's say, 5, maybe 10 years ahead in the back of their minds, right? So the decision to quit the orchestra, that must have not been a decision that went from one year to the other, right? But as a singer and a composer, mostly I'm assuming you're concerned with what's happening this year. Oh, by the way, we don't have an orchestra. Okay, let's move on. So for you, as a not necessarily an outsider, but not being into the management, different stakes are at play, right? So you're joining in and you're saying, okay, what is going to be like this year? And I'm just wondering, when you hear all this talk about, politics and long-term plans for the event, maybe, whether that, in what way you look at that as a singer and composer.
I think about that quite a bit, because now, for as far as I can see, my job as a singer for Eurovision is done. So my connection with Eurovision is bringing other artists to Eurovision. I very much see myself as an ambassador for Eurovision, for example, in my home country and the countries that I make music in. So of course I keep updated with the direction the contest is going, and I always ask myself what I would want to add to Eurovision, what I would want to pare back, how it should be, and but I think we're really in good hands as far as I can see. I think the direction is actually quite interesting, and the modernization that I always want from a format like this is taking place organically, but it has to be step by step, definitely.
Okay, Isabel.
Hi, Cesar. First of all, I'd like to tell you that your song was my favorite song, my 2018 favorite song, and you were great. Anyway, apart from that, I know that you had some Portuguese backing vocalists in your backing vocals, because I'm a personal friend of both of the guys, right? Kiko and the other guy. So my question is, did you enjoy working with them? Of course, you're now saying yes because they are my friends, but no, I know they're good professionals. But what I mean is, did you like this interaction between your staff and the local staff in terms of, of your stage performance? Did it went well? What do you have to say about that?
I want to, before I answer that question, I want to mention that the reason why we even worked with 2 local singers was that while the Eurovision in Lisbon was seems to have been less expensive from the production side, it was actually quite expensive from the delegation side. So not having that video wall, for example, that makes things quite easy. You just have to project something on it. Makes the delegations, of course, they want to compensate for that. And more often than not, it makes them actually spend more money on extra effects that are not already there. So they ended up spending quite a bit on that liftable stage that I had. Of course, that's their own decision. They wanted to boost the song. They had confidence in it. And then we realized, okay, it's getting a bit tight with funds for bringing my singers here. Some of them were in the US, and they just couldn't do it. So we started casting in Portugal. We knew there are talented people there. There were stand-ins, as there always are, rehearsing. So we watched through all the tapes of those stand-ins and then selected Kiko and Ricardo.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it turned out to be fantastic because that was really what it took, that whole concept of connecting with the host nation even one step further, and we felt like we were really part of Eurovision that night and that week.
Great.
And they were really great people.
They are. Apart from great singers as well, but I'm suspicious probably.
Yeah, we handpicked them. I personally handpicked them.
Good.
Okay, so I would like now to come back to Ivor, because you have a very interesting career within Eurovision. You started as the editor of the Eurosong News, which is the official magazine of the International Eurovision Song Contest fan club, OGAE. So do you think that this was helpful for you, or does it sometimes also block you in your work? Do you need to be a Eurovision fan to work for Eurovision?
I don't think you need to be a Eurovision fan to work for Eurovision, but it certainly helps. And I think if you start working for Eurovision and you're not a Eurovision fan, you will very quickly become a Eurovision fan. And my experience with the fans was, we go back now 25 years to when I started working on the fan club magazine. At that time, there was no internet, there was no social media. Fans depended on pen pals and the exchange of information and sending VHS videos through the post of national finals to, and Irving, I have known you quite a long time, and we go back as far as that. So you remember those days. So that was a great time, a great experience, but there's no comparison to today with the amount of information available.
So would Jon Ola or Dave or Cesar call themselves Eurovision fans?
It's a very specific title, fan. I've never considered myself to be a fan of the Eurovision Song Contest. I have a history with the Eurovision Song Contest back to 1998. That was my first year as a head of delegation for NRK Norway. I've been working with Eurovision Song Contest in different positions here in Oslo, and also then, of course, international from Geneva and the EBU. I've never considered myself to be a fan, but I have an enormous respect for Eurovision Song Contest. I love the Eurovision Song Contest, and I was there to take care of the Eurovision Song Contest on behalf of all the members. But the term fan is not something I would like to label myself with, not because I don't, I mean, I'm really, I love the fans of the Eurovision Song Contest, and they are a great asset to the contest. But I work with the Eurovision Song Contest as a professional. That's my background. I have a broad TV background and leadership background, and that's why I ended up in this position, and not because I was a fan. But I absolutely love the Song Contest, and I love the fans.
Mm-hmm. But I think Dave will give a different answer.
Well, if you love Eurovision, I think you're a fan of Eurovision, and I think everybody who works on it and has worked on it is a fan, because I mean, you can't work on something like this and not be a fan of everything that it stands for, of everything that Caesar, does on stage, but also everything around it, the meeting people, the engaging with the audiences, engaging with different people from around Europe, all of that. Since I was a kid, I grew up watching Eurovision like everybody here did. And it inspired me to travel around Europe. It inspired me to meet different people, to want to visit new places, to hear songs in different languages. So I was a fan as a child, through my teenage years, and then I got to go to Eurovision twice in Riga and also in Birmingham, the last Eurovision in the UK and the first in my lifetime that I could go to. But after that, I went entirely in a professional capacity as a journalist, and then later working for the EBU. So I used to cover the event for the BBC when I worked there. But yeah, I mean, I'm a professional like Jan-Ole, but I'm also a fan of the event and everything it stands for. I think if you're in love with Eurovision, you're a Eurovision fan.
So Cesar, you have been participating in so many Eurovision songs. Do you consider yourself as a Eurovision fan meanwhile?
Well, yes and no. I think a fan gets a luxury that I'm not afforded. I'm part of Eurovision, so I'm actually seeing myself as a intermediator between the fans and Eurovision itself. I'm kind of with one leg inside of Eurovision and one side out. So I'm very much torn between that. There's a part of me that can look at Eurovision from the outside, but also there's another part that is inside and actually wants to translate what Eurovision is to me to the fans and to the people that could be fans in the future. So yes and no.
So let's come back to the questions from the audience. Konstantin is asking questions concerning the voting system, and this is also, I think, something that the fans are really concerned about. This year we had 4 countries getting 0 points from the public vote. So is this something that the EBU and the reference group is considering to change this voting system again and again, to have in the end one country ending up not 15th but 13th?
I can just make a short comment because I cannot comment for the future plans of the reference group and the EBU and the Eurovision Song Contest. But I can say that every year we scrutinize what we do, and especially around the voting. There's a lot of analytics, statistics, a lot of discussions going on to make sure that we have the right result, a fair result, and that we conduct this in the best possible way. So there's and I'm sure that discussion will continue within the different bodies that are governing the Eurovision Song Contest. To see if it is a need for change, if there are tweaks or changes that could be done, but I have no sort of insight in how the future will look like there.
Everything is up for discussion, and of course, the Eurovision Song Contest, as we've discussed today, doesn't stand still. It can't stand still. It has to develop, and it did massively in the decade Jan-Ole looked after the show, and it will change again in the next decade. And Martin Österdahl, the new executive supervisor, well, he's not new anymore, but he came in last year, and he already made that change on the backing singers, which was obviously in line with the pandemic and trying to reduce the numbers of people coming. But there are lots of things that the reference group discusses regularly about how to make the show better, how to improve the show, how to improve the presentation of the show. And yeah, certainly, it's uncomfortable to see those 4 countries this year getting 0 points from the televote. And so we would not be doing our duty as custodians of the song contest and guiding the event with the reference group if we didn't discuss whether that was something that possibly needed to change in the future. And the presentation of votes has changed many times in 65 years. So there's no doubt that it could change again.
But since we have a musician taking part in Eurovision here with us, I would like to ask Cesar, would it matter for you whether you come in last with 0 points or with 1 point?
It's a good question. I think there's always going to be a last place, and I think 0 points or 1 point, it wouldn't matter to me personally. I cannot speak for everybody, but I think it can be a great motivator to see that menacing 0, to just kind of like add something, change something, because countries can get complacent in their way they do Eurovision, especially sometimes in the broadcasters. I see a certain routine, and they do things year in, year out. Okay, the artist changes, the team changes, but they don't change. And sometimes it's also good to not only for the EBU to reinvent Eurovision, but also for the national broadcaster to kind of reinvent their approach to Eurovision and how they support the artist, and how they work together with the artist. Every country has a different way of doing that, and sometimes the reason for those 0 points can be found somewhere in there. I'm not saying it always does, but sometimes it does.
Well, I'm coming from Germany, so I really hope from the bottom of my heart that your words are true. Closing and wrapping up this session, I would like to ask the closing question to all of you. This year we celebrated 65 years of the Eurovision Song Contest, and we were talking more or less about the period of decades. So let's think about the 75th anniversary of the Eurovision Song Contest. How will it look like? What do you think in the particular domain that you are involved with? What will change? What do you expect for the Eurovision Song Contest 2031? Maybe we start with Caesar.
2031. I hope that the core values will be the same. I hope that as many as possible live elements will still be at the core of Eurovision. I hope that the backing singers will be live still, if there isn't a pandemic in 2031. And so that for me is something that I hope will stay the same. Everything else, I think, can change pretty much. Actually don't have many things that I want to stay the same, that I need to stay the same about Eurovision, except that it's about the song.
Thank you, Caesar. Ivor, what do you think? How will we have maybe artificial intelligence commentators in 2031?
I very much doubt it. There's no artificial intelligence in commentary. But I think we'll probably have the 7-year-olds who voted for Måneskin attending the contest, watching the contest, talking about the contest. So it'll be a new generation coming up. So we'll just be the old nostalgic people who say those were the days.
Okay, Ivor, thank you. Dave, what do you think about Eurovision 2031?
I think it will look not dissimilar to Eurovision now, because I think the great thing about Eurovision is that although it changes, it stays the same and it's familiar, and it's like Christmas. It comes around every year and you expect, a certain thing from Eurovision every year, and it delivers and it's unique. I think that what will change is the way we interact with Eurovision. That has changed already, and every year it changes in terms of the platforms that people are using. There'll be new digital platforms. There might even be online voting, which is one of the biggest challenges for us at the EBU, is to have voting online, which is very difficult in terms of geo-blocking and that sort of thing. I think maybe we might have found a solution to that by 2031, and certainly the way we interact with Eurovision, the way the public interact with Eurovision will be different then. But the actual contest, I think, will be very much as we know it now, and very familiar, but with little tweaks to just enhance and improve it.
Thank you, Dave. And finally, Jon Ola, what do you think? We will have artificial intelligence interfering into the Eurovision Song Contest, in composing, in hosting, in maybe creating images?
Well, for sure there will be technology developing the song contest. Technology will, develop it, and it's going very fast. But 10 years is not that far into the future. And I agree with Dave. I think we will see a song contest that we are familiar with. And I'm also, with regards to Caesar's comments about live backing vocals on the stage, I really hope so too, because I think that's has been sort of a trademark on Eurovision Song Contest. We have no orchestra, that's fine. but we have live vocals on the stage. No, it's difficult to look 10 years into the future, but I know for sure that I will, on the night of the grand final, I will put my feet on the table and I will open a good bottle of red and I will enjoy the show. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think this is what we are all going to do, and I hope that also our viewers of the Eurovision Conference enjoyed the show. Thank you so much. We are not finished yet, but we all need a short musical interlude, as you use it also for us, as you need for the Eurovision Song Contest. And since we only have a yellow room and not a green room, we use these 5 minutes that you all might need to take now with the runner-up of the AI Song Contest, the German entry from 2020. And it's very different from what you know from Eurovision, but maybe something that you're going to expect for Eurovision in 10 years. Who knows? Enjoy.
Good morning.
Maybe you should give up, stop drinking cause you're so high. I can stop you only if you want to. I can't hear you. Well, it's obvious you're so high. Tell me something I don't know. Not just nonsense, not just nonsense. Are you crying? You've just been alone for too long. I'll marry you, come, I'm kind of fun. Forward fuck, I panic to stay. Oh, come, come, come.
Isabel?
It was fantastic, and very different, as Irving said. So I hope you enjoyed this second day of our Eurovision conference. But I just want to make a small announcement because, as you probably noticed, Pedro Tatanka, our speaker, the singer from the Black Mamba, the Portuguese entry in the Eurovision Song Contest, was absent from our second day of the Eurovisions due to the unpredicted circumstance of the sudden death of a family member of his team. So he apologized greatly. He felt very sorry for not being with us. We wish everybody in his team all the best. And but still, it was a great conference, I think. So I will pass it on to my colleagues to wrap up these 2 fantastic days of discussions and comments and questions and music. So I don't know. Carla, do you want to say something first?
Yeah, thank you, Isabel. Thank you very much. Yes, I think it was a really interesting set of conversations we had yesterday and today. And obviously, as always, time is never enough. What I really enjoyed was looking towards the future. So, for example, the AI, this, when we started with the keynote for this session, also enjoyed looking at the bigger picture with Michael yesterday doing our keynote and focusing on the Eurovision Song Contest as a media event. Things I would like to have discussed, but we will have more to focus on in next editions, is, for example, around issues of sustainability, which I think was already a big theme in Rotterdam, for example, and I'm sure it will become more and more pressing. And here reflecting on what Irving invited us to reflect on. So thinking about the ESC in 10 years time in 2031. So that is for me a topic I will for sure follow in next editions of the contest. So yes, I really enjoyed being here with you, being here with all the people that have join us online on YouTube, Facebook, and other channels, and that maybe will watch us in the future. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here with you once again.
Thank you, Carla. Wilfred, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I hope actually that these 2 days of conference are an encouragement for people to maybe deal with their post-Eurovision depression. And the reason I'm saying that is we had a post on our website, right, and Facebook, asking people, what would you compare post-Eurovision depression with? And some people said it's like Christmas, right? Right after Christmas, you feel like this, and you want it to be Christmas like 365 days a year. But that is possible, I think, definitely. We noticed that 2 days of discussion already lead to so many more questions. And what I actually hope is that seeing, for example, the Science Slam students presenting their research, that it triggers people actually between 2 Eurovision events to actually do research and to find each other online and expand this academic network of people investigating and reading about Eurovision. There's tons of books you can read. Irvin wrote a few, so you'll be busy with reading books between these 2 events and the next one then in Italy. So I really hope that this conference triggered a lot. At least in my view, it did. I have a lot to think about. So see you again next year and in between, I would say.
Yes, and before passing on to Dr. Eurovision and finally to Sophia, I just want to tell our audience that we are planning some initiatives during this long period from one contest to the other, because we don't want you to feel depressed anymore. We want you to help. We want to help you get less depressed. So we are preparing some nice, we believe they are very interesting initiatives, to keep this interest in the Eurovisions and also in the Eurovision contest rolling. So with this announcement, I pass it on to Irving, Dr. Eurovision, who was fabulous yesterday in the quiz. It was really something else.
Thank you, Isabel. Well, we're all doctors, so don't hesitate to book your consultation hour with the Eurovision's team. So I am very happy that you gave us so much of your precious time that we could share our personal view on the Eurovision Song Contest, that is going behind the curtains and behind the stage to show you what else is interesting to find except the voting and the nightgowns that some singers might wear. No, Eurovision is something that you really can deal with 365 days a year, and there are so many approaches, and I'm so happy with every new fan that I can conquer with telling them about these interesting stories. So do the same, make people aware of how interesting Eurovision is, and tell people that they should write their master thesis, their bachelor, their PhD, whatever. And if they do so, they should contact us, that we can build a big network, not only of Eurovision fans, but of Eurovision scholars, and bring all this knowledge to you out there. Sophia.
So, okay, I have the role of closing these 2 days.
Yes.
It was not 2 days. It was teamwork during these last months. So when we created Eurovisions 4 years ago, we felt the importance of sharing knowledge about the Eurovision Song Contest, and the importance to discuss this complex topic, as we saw in these last 2 days of presentations and talkings, that it is so complex that it deserves to be debated and to be studied behind personal tastes and trivia. So we can join together these personal tastes, the trivia, the more I don't know how to say, more critical points of view, and to build on Eurovision Song Contest. So it is a strategy of surveillance. I don't know, surveillance. So sorry. So you can approach us about the topics we discussed during these 2 days. We are available to respond, and very happy to share ideas with you. Feel free to get in touch. And as Isabel said, we are planning to share more content during these years, so wait for us. Since we thought on Eurovision as an opportunity for early career researchers to showcase their work and establish dialogue connections, and show us with more established researchers, we feel free to contact us if you are doing your thesis. So we are waiting for you. It is a pleasure to share, to give this platform for you sharing your work. So our goal is also to enable connections, networking between different type of personals working on Eurovision. So I think we got it in these 2 days, and we would like to thank to all participants, Korjun for the musical interludes, Michael Skye, our yesterday keynote, the participants on Science Slam, Isabella, Svan Holm, Isis, Will Wright, sorry, I'm doing like a Portuguese, José Luis Panea, Stefan Kaps, and our moderators, Dean Voletic and Wilfred, here also in our team. From today's session, we would like to thank Karen van Dijk, I think, John Ashley Burgoyne as keynotes, Cesar Sampson, Dave Goodman, Jan Olasand, Ivor Lytle, and as well Pedro Tatanka, that was available at first for being with us, and unfortunately he can't. So thank you for sharing your experience with us, and I would like to thank all people who shared their questions and follow us, not only in the live broadcastings, but during these last months. And I personally would like to thank the team that embraces this project since the beginning. Irving Volter, that challenged me to do it 4 years ago. Carla Figueira, Isabel Campelo, and Wilfred van Dellen. You are amazing. so I don't have words enough to express. So, and also I want to thanks to our research institutions and the scientific committee, João Soeiro de Carvalho, São José Corpo Real, and Salua Castelo Branco, as well as our volunteers, Mariana Rosa, Adriana Lopes, and Carolina Alves. You were amazing working for us and replying messages at 11. So to post and read, and sorry, but yeah, thank you very much. You are amazing. And as well as my colleague Gonçalo Oliveira for the web development and the amazing website we have, as well as Gonçalo Conceição for design work. Gonçalo Conceição don't want to be thanks on this video, but I will do it. So thank you all for making Eurovisions possible. Again, we will be keeping on touch via Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Eurovisions.eu. So join us and thanks again. See you very, very soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.